Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives.
Well, we're in season 2 of Discover Fresh Perspectives, and today I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Kathrin Lake. Welcome, Kathrin.
David, nice to be here.
Kathrin, I was trying to remember when we first met, and I think it was before we had our daughter, who's 24 now. I think I met you fairly early in my time in Vancouver, and you're not here anymore. But before we get into this, Kathrin, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what you do and where you are.
What I do now is more like it. What as we met as corporate trainers, et cetera, and I had always been teaching writing in night school. I have a degree in film and theater from SFU, but then I got into human resources somehow to pay off my student loan debt, mostly, and also because I was a good manager and I appreciated that. I had some jobs, and anyways, but I was always had this artist self that was stifled, and I kind of kept a lid on that, kept it a secret from my corporate business. I kept very separate, and so when I decided I did not want to do corporate anymore, I started going whole hog into it. But before that, I went as a life coach because you get a lot of opportunities thrown at you from human resources, and life coaching was very new. In fact, I think I had the very first life coach that ever came to Vancouver, Teresa LaRock. I don't know if you.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sure you know Teresa. Yeah, she was my life coach, and like nobody had heard of life coaches. And so I did start a life coaching business, and I thought, oh, I should write a book to go with the life coaching business because writing's one of my strengths, and I had been a playwright and various things. And I said, okay. And so I wrote my first book. And so the first life coaching clients I got in, I found out that they were more interested in the fact that I'd wrote a book and they wanted to know about that. So I ended up going, oh, this is interesting. I became a writing coach instead of a life coach. And I had already been teaching a night school. That's another story, night school and writing. And so I had all these tools to use. And so I started helping people one-on-one get their books out there, write their books. And it just got deeper and deeper. We're talking now like decades that I've been doing this now. And but now I'm, COVID came along and I started doing more things online, different writing conferences. I've now got quite a few books under my belt. And my most famous book is Writing with Cold Feet for those of us who had a lot of reticence to writing or procrastination or writer's block or whatever you want to call it. And so it's become very popular. And so I started doing writing retreats, and that's the other part of my life is I'm living in Mexico now. I'm not living in Vancouver. And so jump in with questions.
So I have no idea who the listeners are. I can't say my listeners because I don't know who they are. But maybe just starting with life coach. What does a life coach do? Because that seemed to lead you into some other things like your writing coaching and things like that. So tell me about a life coach.
Okay, that I was like a life coach for 2 minutes, but there was some very good certified programs, as you know. Now I can't even remember the one that I went into, but I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And that's basically just helping people find their, authentically what they want to do in their lives and how to get there and bridge that gap. It's different. We always distinguish counseling from coaching, and that counseling might look backwards and coaching always looks forward. So that's in a nutshell.
Okay. So life coaching, I probably use one of those. Actually, I've tried a number of those, but I'm a terrible coachee, so that hasn't worked out. I've actually have had some chats with Teresa, who is amazing, and I think she's back here in Vancouver. She was in Ottawa for a while. I think she's back, but that may be another story. So, and you've written that you said you had a number of books under your belt. So, can you maybe tell us about the types of books that you've written?
Okay. And I will also tell you about the types of books I helped other people write because I think
Sure.
that's important and kind of might tie into some of your listeners anyways. So I the books I've written are a lot of books about writing under my name. And then I have written a memoir series. I'm on the third book of it. It should, as you say, drop in in by Christmas this year. And that's about it's called the Happy Hammock series, and that's my memoir series of my life in Mexico and how that happens. And it's kind of a humorous bunch of stories and but it has a through line too of our life in Mexico. And then I also have a pseudonym for my fiction writing because I write murder mysteries. So there we go.
Oh my
And
gosh,
then
that's
and then I've helped a ton of people. I can't even count how many people I've helped write their books. So, for example, there are management people because I was obviously in human resources for like 10 years and I knew a lot of management people and people found me and they said, you know, help me help me with this book project I have. So, which is a really amazing experience because I got deep learning by helping and editing and coaching people in their books. So it was like management, how to green your business. There just goes on and on and on. I actually know a lot of stuff because I've helped a lot of experts write their books. So that was like a lot of nonfiction, and then we have all the fiction people too as well. So
so. There's a couple of different things I'd like to explore, and one of them is how you ended up in Mexico and why Mexico as opposed to all the other countries in the world.
hmm. Well, that's funny. You should ask about that because in my third book, some things that I didn't realize had happened in my life came back, and I started answering that question. Why Mexico is kind of a subject of all three of the books. It's underlying it. Why do I love this place so much? And what attracts me to it? And how did I get here? And I can say, okay, there was these fluky chance things that got me to the first time in Mexico, really fluky chances that got me to this little town that I'm living in now. And but I also had this amazing flashback only like last year, which started me on the third book. So my third book opens with this memory of when I was 7. And when I was 7, uh, the people in the neighborhood, the classic Canadian suburb, had gotten together and decided to do a student exchange, student hosting rather. So everybody in the neighborhood had a student hosting, and they were all from Mexico. And so I was the youngest of 4 kids. And, my brothers and sisters were kind of like they're off doing stuff and that sort of thing. And I was alone with my mother, who was not a very good playmate. And so we got this guy, Ricardo, in who was a little older than my brother. And I don't know, there was something right away about Ricardo that I went, "Oh my God, I love this kid, this boy in my life." And remember, I was half his age, but I could be like, I could crawl all over him, I could hug him, he would hug me and kiss me and all this stuff. And there was just an incredible amount of affection and love and life and vitality. And then, and so they were supposed to come and get a cultural experience, these students of Canada. And the most cultural thing that we had, managed to give him is like the basketball hoop in our driveway. Because technically, we're supposed to have invented basketball, and we're playing donkey on the driveway where you throw, and that's about the most Canadian thing we can show him over a summer that he was with us. But all the students got together and took over this rec center, and they did this whole Mexican fiesta. with the food, the piñatas, the colors, the creativity. And they all gave us these little pots they had handmade and decorated. And it was just so wonderful. I remember this shining moment in my life. And this all came back to me. And also I found a picture of Ricardo only very recently, which kind of now makes sense to me why I was so attracted to Mexico. But my first experiences there, same thing. I just felt so at home. I felt this is the place I belong and everything. And, I was just, I love the colors. I love the people. Um, it's just the great thing of finding where you belong in life and not being at all where you started.
So, you used, so a couple of things. First of all, you didn't know how significant this was until you just recently reflected on it. But you also used the term fluky, and I just love that word. So, what were some of the fluky things that got you where you are? And
Yeah. Okay. The first time I went to Mexico, I um, got a phone call, a fly by night organization who wanted to shampoo my rugs in my apartment. And they said, if you get your shampoos rug and you give your friend or somebody else gets their rug shampooed, we'll give you this great accommodation down to Mexico. I think we only had to
oh,
pay the airfare, right?
huh.
This was many, many, many years ago now, like 30 plus years ago. And I went, oh, I do need my carpets done. And so I phoned up my sister and I said, do you need your carpets? I know you need your carpets done. Come on, let's do this and let's go to Mexico together. So we did that. And this was Puerto Vallarta 30 plus years ago, where it looks incredibly different now. Like it's so large now and trafficy but it was still a small town then. It was a burgeoning small town, but they put us up in these grand, lovely apartments. But we found out that they were also taking us on tours where they put us into a timeshare pitch, as you can imagine, right? And we were like, oh shit. So we let them know how little disposable income we had between us. And they kind of threw us back like fish, into the ocean. And they gave us taxi fare to get back to town. And then we could just enjoy our time in Mexico. And I loved it. And it was kind of on the shoulder of the season. So it was hot. And I was more adventurous than my sister by a long shot. And I paid a guy to take me up on the hills on horses. And it was just me and the guide. It was me, no group. I was me and the guide, and going up in these small villages and watching these women who were washing their clothes in the river because the river was clean enough to do that then. And just everybody he'd meet, he'd stop and he'd say hello. And it was just, I don't know, it was just magical. And I always, always wanted to go back. And I didn't for the longest time. And then I finally met my husband, and I kept on saying he wanted to do things in the world. We went to Europe, and we went to Cuba, and I kept on saying, let's go to Mexico. Let's go to Mexico. And he would go, oh no, it's crime ridden. It's horrible. No, no, I've heard things about no, 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 Mexico. And I went, oh, okay. Oh. And then suddenly he announces to me, honey, I'm going to Mexico for 6 weeks to be crewing on a sailboat. Bye. Enough of you. What? I was like in complete shock and speechless, and I'm not inclined to be speechless, as you know. Um, so he goes down to this little town, and I get these emails. I mean, that, he's waking up in this beautiful tropical paradise in this lagoon and on this sailboat. And they have this French baker who comes around to the boats and takes your order for how many croissants and baguettes you want and pastries of what you would like the next day. And I'm going, are you freaking serious? I just got, this is amazing. So he came back with all these stories and how he loved Mexico suddenly now. Um, and I said, we're going back there. And even in the same calendar year, I think he came back in February, and I said, we're going back in November. because he also said, oh, and by the way, I think the real estate prices are really good there. And I went, really? And another fluke was I had this friend who, she's actually somebody I heard, but she lived across the street from me. And I remember seeing this picture she had pinned up. And I said, what's that picture? And she goes, oh, that's the Mexican casa I'm going to build one day. That's my dream, to build a Mexican casa. And she told me how little it costs to build a Mexican casa. And I went, well, that's a really, really good idea. And so that's another thing that was kind of in the back of my brain. So that's why I said, we're going down there. We're going to check things out. And then the story of the Happy Hammock starts there, because I go down there and we're bound and determined to buy, or I am bound and determined to buy a house or something. And I'm not going to tell you how it happens, because that would be giving away.
Buy the book. Buy the book.
Well,
Very cool. That is so neat. And there's something about warm climates. The first podcast conversation I had was with Helen Wilkie, who had moved to Buenos Aires. She's a writing coach of a different sort, and it was the tango that drew her there. But for you, it sounds like there was just so much magic, you couldn't really not go there.
Yeah, I had to come down and see if, if it was what I remembered it to be. And I'd never been in a small town compared to Puerto Vallarta. I mean, even when I was there 30 years ago, Puerto Vallarta was still considerably bigger back then than where I am now. And I kind of realized that I'd been living in Vancouver all my life. Well, I grew up in North Vancouver, but it was all big city. And I realized I was a small town girl, and I loved a small town. I mean, I go out every morning. I'll go for a walk early in the morning, and I'm saying buenos dias, buenas tardes. Well, buenos dias is good morning to everybody, and everybody's saying good morning to everybody. And I know a lot of people, and we'll stop and we'll chat. And I just realized I'm such a small town girl, and I didn't know that about myself.
Well, I guess you need to be willing to try some things to find out where the right place is. To take a little bit of a risk, or follow your heart, or follow, the things that are serendipitous in nature. I think that's really cool. And, I admire your courage for doing that, although it sounds like it wasn't so much intentional courage as it was just something that was the natural way to do things, the right place to go.
Yeah, well, trust me, in the books, you find that things go sideways, as they always do in travel in other countries, and you don't know the language and you don't know the culture. So, there was a lot of sideways things that went on that makes the book humorous. But I don't know if we had courage, but we also, both of us did not like the cold at all. So you have to like a warm country. You have to be interested in that. That's what drew me there, but that's not what keeps me here. It was what I had sensed there as a child. There's something very deep about this culture. It does have very deep roots. And the people are different. They prioritize relationships over time and money. And that is a very different place to be in. And it takes I had to I knew that there was something different, but I had to have sort of one of my cultural mentors saying, this is what is true about Mexico, and the Mexican people. And once they told me that, I went, oh yeah, that totally makes sense, how different we are. And I know people now, a number of people who've married into Mexican families, and they're like confused sometimes. I'm like, this is why culturally you're trying to make something happen, thinking this is the right thing, and they're thinking this is the right thing, and you're at odds, and they kind of have to go, oh yeah, okay, because there is that cultural mindset is a bit different, and I realized that I thrive in this mindset better.
Remember, my daughter and I went down with a youth group to build a house for a homeless family in Ensenada, Mexico, quite a few years ago, and it was. I think the parents were maybe early 20s, and I had 3 or 4 kids. I can't remember. you know what, but just like the whole culture was amazing. So when we were cooking lunch for all the building team, there's like 30 other people came from, with an earshot or eye shot. And that was like, yeah, we do that. And it was really quite neat that we were able to do that.
Yeah.
So let's see, I think I have a couple of other, oh yeah. So I was wondering about the happy
Happy
couch,
hammock,
happy hammock.
hammock, happy hammock.
So
Literally.
so I was wondering if the story was told from the perspective of the hammock, so that the hammock was telling the story, or if that was just a metaphor.
No, there was an actual hammock, that it was the first hammock that we bought because we were renting and we couldn't buy we did buy some furniture, but we bought very small amount of furniture, so we ended up buying a hammock. And yeah, so that's kind of where the title comes from. And there's stories before and stories after that, about that. So I don't know, I just liked that story. And in all of my books, there's a little what do you call them? Sort of a teaching story as well.
Okay.
And the first one has a hammock in it too.
Okay.
So there's actually one chapter called The Happy Hammock in the book as well.
Very cool. Now, I know when something I saw you post on Facebook or who knows where, but you were helping people write memoirs, and it really captured my curiosity about what's the difference between a memoir and an autobiography. Like I suspect they're quite different, but I have no idea what the difference is and why one would choose one versus the other.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Very simply, an autobiography is kind of cradle to wherever you are now, late in life kind of thing. It's your life story. And sometimes it goes back into your parents and sometimes your grandparents, but it's really kind of just chronicling the major events of your life. Whereas a memoir has some sort of focus. So mine obviously is a memoir of just my years in Mexico. So yours could be just your career, right? Or it could be your parenting,
Okay.
right? Or something like that. It usually has a focus of some kind. Also, memoirs are a little bit more creative nonfiction.
Hmm.
And creative nonfiction is, I always try to state it this way is, if you're going to be able to make up some stuff uh, in in that doesn't go into the facts realm. So everybody's at a wedding. There's 200 people there. Everybody's going to have a different perspective
Hmm.
on what
Mhm.
goes on there. It's not a question of truth or not truth. There's facts. There's two people who got married and such a day. There's, their wedding colors were this. Blah blah. There's facts. But then after that, it's all perspective. So one person says, "Oh, the kiss at the altar was so sweet." And another person goes, "Oh, I thought it was quite awkward." They all have different, and then God knows what's happening in all the different corners of a wedding, so there's all different perspectives of an event. So you have to kind of remember that you're telling your perspective of something. And and that is what I do when I'm teaching people about memoirs. Say, hey, don't get too stuck up on the facts. Do Because there are going to be things, gaps in your memory, etc., where you're going to have to bring back the essence of being there. So that becomes the creative nonfiction part, right? Like your memory is notoriously unreliable, anyways. And so we can say that we have biographers and history people, and that, yes, they do link up the facts, but there's a lot of facts if you look into it over the years where, somebody has taken liberties, shall we say, for political reasons and for whatever reasons with the facts. So when you're doing with your own personal history, you have to, for example, I had um, a writer, and she had done this wonderful story about how she went on the classic station wagon trip, and everybody got out of the gas station, went into the little store, and they all got back in, took off, and left her behind. And she was little. And so she did this wonderful thing of looking around the store and all these fascinating things, and then suddenly nobody's here, and she's doing details. There's a guy at the cash register, and he's getting his change back and all this stuff, and he's all these wonderful kind of juicy details she put in. and this picture of her. And so when she'd finished her reading, I said, please, for the new writers, please tell us, do you remember all those things actually? And she goes, oh, no, I made that up. Those parts up. She knew that the fact was this had happened, but she was embellishing it. She was being a good storyteller. And even in your memoirs, you need to be a good storyteller. You're still telling stories and engaging people. So you got to find where you can do that.
Like, seems to me that would be a lot more fun. When I think of an autobiography, it tends to be factual and chronological and all those kinds of things. But the idea of a memoir, based on what you've just said, I could see writing two different memoirs about the same event, but from different perspectives. And what made me think of that is I had to write an article for a magazine one time about what goes on in conferences. So I decided to write it from the perspective of Charles Chandelier III. So, what would a chandelier have noticed going on? So kind of taking out a lot of the other biases, but well, presumably, but looking at it from that perspective. And it was so much fun because there weren't the same constraints. And it sounds like with the memoir that you're not shackling yourself with the need to be truthful. It's about being enjoyable, and there's something in it. But I'm going all over the place here because it's my podcast. I can do that. I remember reading something about how most of memory, like people describe it an accident, they describe it totally different perspectives, and that quite often with memory, we describe it the way we would have liked it to have been rather than the way it was. And I'm not sure what it's like with you and your husband, but my wife and I occasionally remember exactly the same event quite differently. And I've learned now for peace in the household to not argue or debate or even discuss specific parts of that event because in truth it really doesn't matter. Like, why do I need to be right about this? And writing a memoir seems to free one up so you can remember things any way that you want to and take different perspectives. So, when you said it was the Happy Hammock, I thought that would have been so cool to write this from the perspective of the hammock, right?
You have a creative mind. You have a creative mind. And I think that's great. I love that idea of the chandelier and everything like that. That's wonderfully creative. I still want to get you in our word flow class because you will get that done. It will happen. But I just wanted to say about truth. There's really two kinds of truth. My mentor used to say there's small T truth and big T truth. And the small T truth may be facts, but the big universal truth is maybe sort of, well, when we're doing memoir, it's what is the essence of it? What is the actual thing that is behind this story? What is the theme that is going on here? And what is the real truth of something? So you can have the facts are facts, but truth is something a little different. It is something that can be perspective. As we know these days, a lot of perspectives going on here. And I do appreciate facts. So I'm not, if you're going to go off facts, you better tell people you're going off facts or they better understand it that way. But yeah, it's interesting. Truth is an interesting subject all by itself. But I love your creativity. Go for it.
So of course, everything that I hear, I listen through my own perspective and biases for what you're saying, Kathrin. And it seems to me that something could be truthful, but not necessarily true, right? Not objectively true, but it's full of truth at some level. And that may be totally false, but I don't care. I just
Yeah. Well,
I,
somebody can be, well, I don't know if I can have a really good metaphor for it, but I just know that sometimes you can just layer a whole bunch of facts and they do not give you the feel of something at all. It's just dead. It's just
right.
a dead picture of things. And, I particularly love very well layered things where getting to the truth in a novel or something, somebody's trying to get to the truth, murder mysteries, and you can uncover all kinds of facts, but what's really going on here, is kind of the interesting part. And I always think of myself as a detective when I'm a writer. I'm trying to figure out what the truth really is. So for my 3 books on the Happy Hammock, it's really been like, why do I love Mexico so much? What is this place? Why is it so attractive to me? I'm on an exploration. I'm a detective here and I'm trying to figure it all out.
So I love that. And there's a number of things that I'm taking away from our conversation. And one is sort of the value of serendipity, may be the wrong word, but just sometimes things are meant to happen and you couldn't design it that way. But looking backwards, you could see all the elements that brought it to that point, to where you are now. So that's one thing. Another thing is just about, knowing where the right place is for you, that small town versus big town. And, it's kind of like when a basketball is going around the rim and finally goes through the hoop. And it's just that sense of yes. And, another thing that never occurred to me that like when you talked about the memoir, it's in 3 pieces. So that, oh, it doesn't all have to be in one. And especially when you said that the third one, as you were writing that, brought back some of the things that you remember from way back when. And I love that. So,
Yeah.
and I know that, and you've got these courses and all kinds of things that we can put in the program notes, Kathrin. So if you're doing courses or things like that, or certainly your books, especially the more popular ones, let's get those cranked up. But it's been really good to see you again, just to explore a little bit, because I've learned about you, I've learned about your travels, and I've learned about myself at the same time, and had fun. So my any expectations that I've had for this call have been far exceeded. So I thank you so much.
No,
So
thank you. And if you're ever heading down to Mexico and want to try something different, small town, please contact me and I'll set you up.
I can assure you all I need is an invitation and airfare, and I'll be there.
Awesome. There we go.
So I've been here today with Kathrin Lake. Kathrin, thank you so much for being with us.
As we say in Mexico, de nada.
And this is David Gouthro with yet another episode of Discover Fresh Perspectives.
Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.